and I'd like to welcome you to this Oracle Outlook video reading. In this video, I'm going to be doing a reading centering on the winter solstice and the season of winter, because if you've been following my channel as of late, you know that my video readings now have kind of spread out and become a little more sparse, because now I'm doing them seasonally because of my working schedules and time constraints because of those working schedules, right? So winter solstice starts on Tuesday, December the 21st. It is now Sunday, December the 19th as I'm filming this. So I've got a little bit of lead time, so I figured this would be a perfect time to bring out the cards and do a reading on what the collective might need to know or consider or do, or what we might experience as we move through this particular season in our lives. So that is the context that I'm giving this particular reading. So the cards that I'm going to be using for this video reading, I'm very excited because it is my own tarot deck. So I'm going to be using the Mitchell Tarot for this. Now, I created the deck earlier this year, and when I started my deck creation process, I did not think I would ever make a tarot deck, but making all those Oracle card decks kind of eased me into making a tarot deck. So I've made it, and I'm very excited with how it turned out. So I figured this would be a great time as the year 2020 comes to a close to kind of use this deck to round out the year of readings that I've done. So again, I'm working with the Mitchell Tarot, and if you are interested in the deck and you want to learn more about it, I will be leaving a link to a dedicated page on my website that will help you or inform you more about it. And if you fancy it and you feel like you want to add it to your collection, there'll be ways on that page that you can make that happen. So again, I'm going to be working with the Mitchell Tarot by yours truly. And so now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and see what my deck, the Mitchell Tarot, wants to share with regards to what we need to know, consider, or do to move through the experiences we might have for this particular winter solstice and the season of winter. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I shuffle the cards, I'm focusing on my intention for this reading, and that is, what do we need to know? Information or advice or guidance, it's in our best and highest good as we begin the winter season, starting with the winter solstice. So what is in our best and highest good as we move through this particular season in time? Feeling one more time will be good. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Now I'm going to fan the cards out. And I'm going to be looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. So when I do these general readings, I like to work with a line of 5. It's my standard go-to. So I have card 3. I see card 4 here. I'm looking for the 5th and final card, and I like this one. Alright, so those are the 5 cards. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up, and I'm going to move it to one side. Now that I have my cards selected, I'm going to just line them up in the order that they were selected. Just taking a moment to look at the line. See that it's somewhat straight. Alright, and that every card can be seen in the view. Alright, So now when I'm working with a line of 5, I usually like to start with the card in the middle. For me, the middle card usually represents what the central issue is or what we're being asked to focus on. So now keeping with the context of the question, this is going to be what's the focus for the winter season, starting with the winter solstice. And the card is, here we have 10 of Earth. So in my deck, the suits are named by the elements. So if you're familiar with the more traditional tarot deck, this would be the suit of coins or the suit of pentacles. Okay, so the 10 of Earth is a card that can talk about, for some of us, the focus will be on our family. The tree in the visual is a pun for our family tree. So there may be issues either with immediate family or extended family that we are being asked to focus on or put some energy into. There could be something having to do with the growth and development within a family or a familial type situation. And I'm saying that because the tree is about growth and development. With that in mind, I'm seeing tree from Lenormand. And so the tree in that particular system represents patience. So it could be like if we are planting seeds, waiting for something to grow and develop, it may require some patience. And that's keeping with the context of the season of winter. That's a time of hibernation. That's a time where things like trees lose their leaves, and so the branches are exposed. Well, I'm having a thought about that. So I'll come back to that. There's, about branches being exposed. So it's a time when, things that are going to grow and develop kind of go into a hibernation period or incubation period. So this could just be a matter of, if there is something that you're trying to grow and develop, I'm separating that from the family issue. If you're something that you're trying to grow and develop, then it could just be a matter of you're planting the seeds and the seeds are going to take some time to grow. So you have to be willing to be patient in the process of that growth and development. Okay, so now, the thought that I had when I mentioned the words branches are exposed. So there could be something about either exposure within a family situation, some type of, the best way I could put it would be some kind of revelation or some kind of truth. And it may have to do with extended family members. I'm even feeling like somebody may find out about their family history or something having to do with their ancestry or their lineage that may be of some surprise to them. It could even be that somebody's exploring their ancestry, their lineage, their genealogy. So I'm seeing all of that. So there may be some surprising developments within that. Okay, if I go back to the family situation that I started with, this card can talk about history. Go with the idea that things are passed down. So there may be something about an actual inheritance. If we go with the idea that the suit of Earth can represent material matters, one of those types of material matters could be things of monetary matters or financial concerns. So there may be something about an actual money type situation within a family dynamic, or that we are talking about something that's been passed down. So that could be like taking a look at our family history. It could be, if we're talking about physical well-being, let's say, it could be something that's hereditary, that's being passed down from one generation to the next. If we're talking about something maybe more internal, which could be something emotional or psychological, then this could be about a familial influence that has been passed down in the family or within the family structure, and we're bringing it to light, or that it's a matter of not wanting history to repeat itself. So the idea here would be about what have we learned from history, especially if we don't want that particular experience to be repeated, right? The other thing I will say is that for some people in a more business sense or maybe more material sense, sometimes this card can be about a family run or owned type business. So there may be that. And as I'm saying that, if it's a personal thing, this is about maybe keeping family business, quote unquote, within the family. So I'm seeing that. So the 10 of Earth is really about, planting seeds now for success down the road, because this card is about material success. but it's also a card about paying attention to history, and especially within our family unit or dynamic or structure, right? So I'm taking a step back to see what else I need to say. Yes. So if we're talking about maybe one spiritual practice, the tree here is a pun for the tree of life. So I always think of Kabbalah. So it could be that someone is exploring, I would say, the more metaphysical or esoteric branches, playing on the tree, of their maybe more traditional or mainstream component or part of that particular path. So for instance, I mentioned Kabbalah. So the more traditional aspect of Kabbalah would be Judaism, right? So it may be exploring the more mystical or esoteric or metaphysical aspect of that particular spiritual path or tradition, right? It could also be that you are discovering that maybe there's something in terms of lineage, something that's been passed down in terms of a spiritual path or tradition from one generation to the next. And it could just be a matter of contemplating whether or not you want to pass that on or pass that down to your offspring if you have children and if you understand that. So that's what I'm seeing with the Ten of Earth. Of course, now we're going to take a look at the surrounding cards. So the meanings of the card that's the card wants to bring forth may fluctuate or change or shift depending on the outer cards. So starting with the card on the far left, opening the line up, we have the Three of Water. So the first thing that I will say about this card can be about, good times or celebrations. That would make sense given the holidays that are within the winter season. So if you're maybe more mainstream or traditional, you'd be considering Christmas and New Year's. If maybe you're more off the beaten path, you might be contemplating what you're going to do for Yule, because Yule starts at the same time the Winter Solstice starts, and it runs until the end of the year. So you may be contemplating on what you want to do with your time for the holidays and who you want to spend that time with, because the Three of Water is all about get-togethers, social events, going to venues where we have good times with people that we get on well with, right? So that is, in one respect, what this card is about. This card is about social invitations, social events, gatherings with other like-minded people, those kinds of things. Now, if I go maybe with some aspects of what I talked about with the Ten of Earth as a focus card, with family, this of course could be, spending time with family, but it could also be for people who may be finding the holidays especially challenging and maybe due to family at this time of the year. Then the Three of Water is about finding ways to gain emotional support. For me, sometimes this card can be about support groups and things like that. So it could just be a matter of being around like-minded people. The wonderful thing about adults is that if we're having challenges with the family of origin, family we were born into, then this card can suggest maybe considering the idea of who do you consider to be chosen family? If you're married with children, you get the opportunity to choose your partners, your spouses, things like that, right? But if you're not married, it may be a matter of who are you willing to choose to spend your time with? Maybe people that you consider to be like family, right? So this card again is about good times, celebrations. Sometimes I see this card as, people who get together for wedding showers or baby showers. So that would make sense with the idea about passing things down, or the family branching out, so to speak. It's growing and developing, right? And so that could be the inclusion of a new addition to the family, right? So that's what I'm seeing with the Three of Water. Now, if you are of the more spiritual bent, going what I said with the Ten of Earth about exploring maybe the more metaphysical or esoteric branches of your particular spiritual tradition, maybe the one that you were raised in, then this card would suggest on some level being more aware of the maybe more intuitive or psychic aspects of that particular path or tradition, right? It's about feeling your way into it. The 3 is a number of growth and development, but also increase and expansion. So it could just be a matter of you giving that area of your life more time and attention. Even with that, it may be a matter of finding like-minded people who share a similar belief or share a similar belief system, that kind of thing. And it could even be that if you can't do it locally based on where you live, where your location is, then this card may be suggesting, finding an online group. Sometimes I see this card as doing like meetup groups or Facebook groups, something of that nature, right? So there is that aspect of it. The one other thing I will say, if I stick with the maybe metaphysical or esoteric aspect of the Ten of Earth, then this card is about like being a reader, like yours truly. And sometimes this card can be about going public with that particular reading practice. So if you practice some kind of divination within your spiritual framework, then this card might suggest how you might consider the idea of branching out and going public with that. This card is about reading for the public. So those are the aspects of the 3 of Water that I will touch on for now. So now let's see what card is in between the 3 of Water and the 10 of Earth. Here we have the 3 of Air. So the first thing that I notice is that we have the number 3 repeating 2 times. So remember now, I touched on it in one aspect. I said the number 3 is about growth and development and increase and expansion, right? The other thing about the 3 is that it's a number of creative self-expression, and it's also a number about productivity. So this is maybe a time where we are considering how productive either we've been as the year comes to an end, how productive we've been, or maybe we're planting the seeds for being productive in the coming year, right? So that's what I'm seeing with the 3 repeating 2 times in a row. Now, we have the 3 of Air. So I didn't touch on it with the suit of Water here, but for me, the suit of Water represents our feelings, our emotions. So if you're reading a more traditional deck, then this would be the suit of Cups. Here we have Air. So Air represents the mind for me. And so this is akin to the suit of Swords in a traditional deck. So if you look at the image, here we have a couple on the card. So here we have a man in the foreground, and in further in the background, we have a woman who's walking away. So sometimes this card can be about severance or separations, and with that, it may be a more metaphorical question that I'm posing right now in this moment is, what do we need to walk away from, right? If we're having problems within maybe a family dynamic, or even with a social group or social environment, then the 3 of Air in between the 2 could suggest, what do we need to walk away from? Do we need to walk away from? And how can we best do that, right? Sometimes this card can represent communication issues or problems, and taking the time and the energy to resolve them to the best of your ability, right? Sometimes you can do that, and then sometimes it's a little more problematic or difficult to do so. But for me, the 3 of Air can represent, again, some kind of severance or separation, needing to walk away from maybe a problematic or unhealthy situation, or, trying your level best to resolve a communication issue or difficulty. The clouds in the background can represent clearing the air of some kind of misunderstanding, and it probably has resulted in a miscommunication, right? Maybe a poor choice of words, maybe needing to rethink the words that we have chosen to express, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm seeing with the 3 of Air, kind of different energy here, but it makes me feel like we're taking a look at our family and social dynamics and needing to consider those relationships that we want to keep and allow to grow and develop, and maybe those that we feel have kind of we've outgrown and needing to kind of move on or move away from. And if you're going to do that, maybe think long and hard about the words that you're going to use to express that sense of needing to move on. And it could even be that if there is some sort of difficulty here with a relationship or specific relationships, then that could be, again, with the Three of Water, talking about a need for emotional support, because maybe thinking about moving on, that kind of thing. And then the 10 here, if we're going with the numerology, since I talked about the numerology of the 3, the 10 would be, it's a number of transitions because it represents an ending and a beginning at the same time. And maybe, we're in that in-between phase of the ending and the beginning, right? So that's what I'm seeing with the 3 of air, right? It could just be a matter of how can we give thought and consideration to something that maybe we need to clear the air about, right? I'm hearing a song in my head. It's by a group called Peach Union. It's an old song back in the day. But the line of the song that I'm hearing is talking about a change in atmosphere, right? So that's what I'm hearing. So there may be about somebody making a change in atmosphere. Oh, and as I'm saying that, this thought just came in to me. Okay, so since I talked about a change in atmosphere, sometimes the 3 of air can talk about a move or a change in location. Here's the rub with that. Usually this card, when it talks about a change in location of move, usually represents a person who's moving, is moving to a place where there's no immediate familial connection, like they're going to be separated from family, right? So there's that sense of separation that I was talking about, right? And with that, it may be a matter of what is that new location going to offer in terms of maybe social outlets, right? Because there won't be a family dynamic or members of the family in that new location, right? And so how do we best do that? So we're not creating a sense of isolation or homesickness or things like that. That's usually what I see with a relocation. And then I will add to that. The 10 of Earth, when it talks about real estate or property, can talk about somebody who's maybe moving to a new apartment within an existing apartment building, or there's something about a townhome or a condo. This card, in terms of real estate, would represent multi-level living situations, or a place where it's more communal, where like groups of people live together. So those are the things that I usually see in terms of real estate with the 10 of Earth. So that could be, like, while it may be good news that maybe somebody's moving on, maybe moving to a new place, a new location, and it could even be a move that's connected to work, because sometimes the 10 of Earth is about companies or corporations, so there may be something about that thrown in there. But it would be a move possibly where the person is going to be separated from family. Like they're going to be out in a place where they're all by themselves, like I said. So that's what I'm seeing with the first 3 cards. So now let's move on to the other side of the line and see what we see there. So starting with the card next to the 10 of Earth, we have the World. Okay, if I wasn't sure about a move as a possibility, I am now. Because one of the meanings that I have for the World can represent a geographic change in location. That's a nice phrase for a move. However, this would imply that there's some sort of distance with that. So it could even be that if somebody's not moving from one state to another, that would be a long distance move. Then it could even be like somebody's moving to another part of the world. Because this card, of course, could be, something that's more global or foreign, something having to do with moving overseas or something of that nature. So there is that. Now, the other thing that I will notice, keeping with the numerology, this card is number 21. So we have the number 3 repeating with the 3 of water, 3 of air, and the world, right? The world as 21 reduces to 3. So the number 3 is being repeated again. So again, this is about expansion, increase, growth, and development. It's also a card about result and productivity. Also about creative expression, like I said, right? So now, I talked about the 10 being a number of transition, about endings and beginnings. The world also represents the successful completion of a cycle or a situation or a chapter in one's life. It can also represent, as that is coming to an end, we're starting the next phase or the next expression, keeping with the 3 of our journey through life, right? So it could be a matter of somebody is reaching the end of a very important or significant chapter in his or her life, because the world is a major arcana card, so it talks about important issues or events, right? And wanting to end that or resolve that successfully. That would make sense if I go back to the Three of Air when I talked about the idea about clearing the air, a change in atmosphere. If we're talking about communication issues, wanting to resolve those, we're wanting to resolve those successfully, right? The world in that sense could also be about completing something that allows us to move on, right? So I'm seeing that it's about a situation that may be coming full circle, kind of thing. I'm taking a step back to see what else do I want to say about the world. So yeah, the only other thing I will say, I talked about this earlier with the person or persons who may be exploring something with online groups. The world would be a pun for the World Wide Web. So that would be another thing about an internet connection possibly. And that would make sense too, because the internet allows us to connect with people in other parts of the world. Yeah? So that's what I'm saying. But this season is a major opportunity for us as a collective. This would be the world at large, right? A pun for that, to kind of resolve issues. So that could be, the world itself, maybe something of a more global nature, coming to a head, coming full circle. We are seeking some sort of closure or completion or ending to that situation that affects everybody. I could think of one thing off the top of my head that everybody in the world is being affected by at this moment. I'm going to let that rest with you and kind of let your imagination kind of figure out where I'm going there. But there could be some resolution to that as this year comes to a close and we move into the next year, right? Again, this is about ending. So as this year comes to an end, maybe in the coming year, there may be something that affects the world at large, maybe reaching some kind of conclusion or state of completion. Wouldn't that be wonderful, right? But it could also be, too, that there may be highlighting issues around the world, something of a global nature, something that may affect a group or a population all at the same time. Not the entire world, maybe, but maybe a large group or population in the world, right? So I'm seeing that as a possibility. If we're talking about walking away from certain situations, how can we do that successfully? But again, this is an important card. Can't overlook it. But its emphasis is on the successful completion of events, circumstances, conditions that allow us to move on and move on to the next stage. Okay, so now, last card in this reading, rounding things out, we have the Page of Earth. So first thing I will say is I'm going to draw an additional card for me because pages represent news or messages. So this card can be about a messenger. So I will draw another card to see what the particular message is. Now, if I move that aspect aside, the Page of Earth is the student card, right? So in this particular case, since I'm doing a reading for the collective, this could be about what we are learning, especially coming after the world. What are we learning on a global nature or in a bigger sense? The world in this particular case can represent the bigger picture, right? So we're taking a look at the bigger picture, or we're having a better understanding of what the bigger picture is, right? The world can also represent a new level of awareness, and that would make sense because the page is at a learning stage of development. It usually represents a state of immaturity, and that's just a way of saying a lack of experience, or we're on the path to gaining more maturity. Again, more experience, right? But coming after the world, it would make me feel like after the sense of completion or the ending of this particular cycle or pattern, then the question here is, what did we learn as a result of having gone through that experience? What did it teach us, either maybe about the world at large, our own world, because each and every one of us has our own world that we live in, right? Within the larger world, and how do we take those lessons and move forward through life, right? how do we take what we have learned and practically apply it to our lives? Again, now the other thing that I'm noticing is that we have 2 cards from the suit of earth. So that's again about material matters. It's about practicality. It's about the practical application, the right and best use of our resources, right? And resources doesn't necessarily have to just be financial or monetary, right? Resources can be all types of things, but how do we take that that resource, or maybe becoming more resourceful in our minds and going forward with that, right? The one thing I will notice in the card here, in the image that I chose for this card, there's a little light at the top of the image here, so that could be, shining a light. I love the fact that it's above the figure in the card, so shining a light, shedding light, being above the head could be like having an aha, an epiphany, that kind of thing, right? And then here we have, she's next to a library, or walking in from the outside to a library. Here we have like shelves of books, right? So this could just be accumulated knowledge. That brings me back to the 10 of earth. Remember, one of the things I said was about things that are being passed down. So this could be accumulated knowledge, history, again, and we get to choose, what did we learn from history, or are we going to have to repeat the lesson because we didn't learn it, right? So again, we have knowledge here that it could be acquired or accumulated. This could literally be, somebody who is in school. In this regard, then the world can represent graduation. So somebody who maybe is graduating from school and contemplating what they're going to do next, since this is at the end of the line, right? It's following graduation, and contemplating, could be that the person is moving on to a further course of study, right? Or again, how do I take what I've learned and move out into the world with that knowledge, right? So it could be going one or two ways. Now, the other thing I will say is that if you notice, she's reading a book. That is a visual pun for me for being a reader, which I talked about with the 3 of water. So we have the same kind of message here, book ending this particular reading. So there may be something for some people in the collective to consider about their reading ability. So it could be that somebody is taking up a course of study, maybe to become more proficient in reading with a particular oracle, right? Or again, they're being given a heads up for their consideration about taking their knowledge about their particular oracle or the system that they work with and going out into the world with it, going out in public with it, right? It could even be, could be you join a group, a group that shares the similar interest with that particular oracle or system. And that would make sense if we do it online, again, Meetup or Facebook groups, right? Or that you find a way to do readings online. So that could be through Skype, through Zoom, or some other internet platform to share that with, right? And with that, if you're feeling like you're ready to go public, then this would be the idea about branching out, right? And one way to branch out would be to go public so you can gain more practice and experience, right? So I'm seeing that. It could also be, again, going back to maybe the more metaphysical or esoteric branch of your particular spiritual path or tradition. It could be you studying with someone or a group of people, studying to further your knowledge base. Maybe you've got your roots in something, and now it's about, branching out or moving to the next stage or level of that particular tradition, education, knowledge, things like that, right? Yeah, so that's what I'm seeing with the page of earth. So now I'm going to go ahead and draw that additional message card that I talked about, and we'll place it next to the card. So the sound you're going to hear, because you won't be able to see me unless I do it at the very top. So let's see if maybe you can see me. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and shuffle the deck again, and I'm asking the question, what additional message does the page of earth have? What does she bring, or what does she bear in terms of a message or news? So I'm going to go ahead and one more time I'm going to cut the cards. You might not be able to see it entirely, but I'm cutting the deck again. I'm going to fan the cards out at the top of the screen. Alright, so now I'm looking for the card that's getting my attention, and I see it right here. So I'm going to place it here. I'm going to leave the cards in the fan above. So now I'm going to turn the card over. Now this is the additional message card. So here we have the Ace of Fire. Oh, the first thing that I want to say about this card, for me in tarot, aces represent seasons. So for me, this is the season of spring. So I love the fact that the Page of Earths is the last card in the line, and that Ace of Fire talks about the spring. So this is about, you know, that period where the winter is going to be coming to an end and the spring is going to start, right? So it could just be a matter of, you know, moving out into the world with new knowledge or awareness, that kind of thing. If we go with the idea that this is talking about our knowledge base, what we have learned, right? This card can be about knowledge that we are passionate about, that we are enthusiastic about, or something that inspires us or motivates us, right? For some people, and I think this may be more metaphorical, you know, the idea about being in the season of winter is about, you know, hibernation, right? And then shifting to spring is about where things start to bloom and blossom, and, you know, and things come back to life, right? With that, one of the meanings of Ace of Fire for me is about getting our groove back, getting our mojo back. So maybe if you've been feeling like you've lost the zest or zeal for life, something could happen this particular season for you where you get that back, right? And you get it back in a big way, right? So you may be inspired to do something, inspired to take something on. Sometimes the Ace of Fire can be about creative endeavors, right? And that would make sense with the 3. Remember, I said the repetition of the 3 could be about creative self-expression, right? So this could be about you are inspired or motivated to create something. Now, one of the things I will say, the Ace of Fire for me can represent a manuscript. And sometimes when I see that, it's about like somebody who's put a manuscript on the shelf or on the back burner, and something may happen where you're being called, led, or guided to take the manuscript off the shelf and blow the dust off of it, whether that's in the literal sense or the metaphorical sense, right? Because it may have been sitting around for some time. And you're feeling like you want to get back into that particular project, right? And that would make sense too, because coming back to the Page of Earth, the figure is reading a book. So there may be something about somebody who's actually writing a book, or I said a manuscript, so it could be a book or it could be a screenplay, something of that nature. And you're feeling like you want to get back into that. If it's not a book in particular, it could just be some other creative endeavor. But my first go-to is I always go with writing, right? So there is that. The other thing I will say is that if we go back to the idea where I was talking about somebody who is thinking about or could be thinking about branching out in terms of their reading practice and going public with it, the Ace of Fire talks about new work, new jobs, new ventures, new endeavors or enterprises in the business sense. So there could be somebody who's actually even thinking about that. If that is the case, then this card maybe as a timing factor could be suggesting like you may want to think about doing the groundwork or planting the seeds for that, and maybe it would kind of foster or grow or develop, or you would be more primed for spring to kind of just put yourself out there. That's what I'm seeing with that. So I'm taking a step back to see what else do I want to say about the Ace of Fire. The only other thing I will say about the Ace of Fire is that this is an important time where maybe you're feeling or could be feeling a sense of like an energy boost, right? If I go back to the idea where I talked about with the tree, and I talked about it from a Lenormand aspect, the tree in the Lenormand system, can talk about health and healing. So let's just talk about well-being as a thing, right? So then this card could be about, somebody working on their well-being enough to kind of maybe reclaim their energy. Maybe their energy has been low, and they're working on taking steps to rectify that. And they're feeling maybe by the time the seasons change, because sometimes the weather does affect us, right? There are people who get into, I think it's called a seasonal affect, right? And so they may be feeling a sense of depression. Gray clouds here in this card, you know, and that may be due to climate or weather or something seasonal, right? But that could lift or change towards the end of the season, right? But if it's not about that in the literal sense and with the weather and all that, then this could be about energetically, right? You kind of come back into your own. You get a boost of energy. You're feeling maybe more supercharged, you know, ready to take something new on. Aces, again, represent potential for the future. An initial stage is something in its beginning stage, right? And it could also be, too, if I talked about, and I'm going to bring this full circle, that's the world, and end on this note. I started talking about family dynamics. It could be that you have learned an important lesson within your family structure or dynamic, and with that, you've learned to empower yourself, right? It motivates you to empower yourself somehow, some way. I am a comic book geek, so sometimes with this card, I think of the words that Uncle Ben from the Spider-Man story, Uncle Ben told Peter Parker right before his passing, his tragic passing, and if you know the story, you know what I'm talking about. But he told Peter that with great power comes great responsibility, right? So if you are in the process of reclaiming your power, it goes hand in hand with taking responsibility for your role or your part in the situations, the circumstances, or the conditions that you have experienced, right? And I'm not saying it as a way for you to take a look at that and assign blame or fault. But when we choose to claim responsibility for our part in situations, it can be very freeing. It could be very liberating, right? It could be very powerful. So I'm just offering that perspective for your thought and consideration. And I'm saying that because I'm feeling like for some people that's going to be tied to either a family matter in the present moment, or the resolution. It's going to help with the resolution of a family matter from the past. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end this particular Oracle Outlook video reading. As I close and wrap up, if you stayed with me to the end of this reading, I want to say thank you so much for giving me the gift of your time and your attention. I know with all the choices there are in the world these days, you could have chosen to be somewhere else, and I'm just so happy and gratified that you have chosen to spend this time with me. And I hope that you got something out of this particular experience. So I'm James Himm Mitchell. As I close and wrap up, I want to say thank you for sharing the space here with me, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you in a future video reading. So until then, I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I hope that you have a wonderful winter solstice and winter season. Take care.